And welcome to another episode of the Top Attorneys of North America podcast. Today, we're speaking with a powerhouse in criminal defense, Amber Vazquez, board certified criminal defense attorney out of Austin, Texas, widely known as the Queen of Acquittals. Amber, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
The pleasure is mine, believe me. For the folks listening in, Amber, I know you lead Vasquez Law Firm, PLLC in Austin, Texas. You have handled some of the toughest state and federal felony cases in Texas. Before we dig into your work, let's let our listeners know a little bit about your background and what inspired you to become an attorney and specifically a criminal defense attorney.
All good questions. I'm a fifth generation Texan. I'm Mexican Irish, as Texan as you can get, a little bit of everything. Half Hispanic, half white. Was raised in Fort Worth and went to UT. And, I'm married. I've got four kids, two of my own, two of my husband's that we raise, and two French bulldogs. But I've been doing this for about 22 years now here in Austin, and pretty much from the get-go started handling really serious cases and started working in federal court. And I would say the difficulty level has only gotten more challenging as it's gone, and the cases have gotten more serious, and it just all sort of sneaks up on you. And then all of a sudden, here you are 22 years later, and lots of crazy things have happened along the road.
Did it go fast?
It didn't, it didn't. I mean, I had kids in there and, raised people and all kinds of things. I've had cancer, beat that. It's been a
Wow.
long, crazy road, but here I am. I've gotten all through it. And, it has been interesting because I've really tried to, build my reputation the old fashioned way. When I first started, it was pre-internet because I'm old, so I've done it a minute. And when I first started, I kid you not, I passed out flyers at the Fiesta grocery store because Hispanic ladies were there and I knew that they would trust me with their loved ones. So that was my go-to because I was like, well, these are my people, so I'm going to start here. And that's how I started. I literally hustling with and things have worked out very, very well. So I'm no longer hustling flyers at Fiesta, but as a young startup attorney, there was no way up. We didn't have a public defender's office here. You literally just had to start scrapping it along if you wanted to start your own practice. There was no guide to do it. There's no big firm that hires you. You just had to get up and start scrapping. So, leading up to that, I clerked for a federal judge and worked in different capacities. But prior to all of that, what really made me want to do this was when I was in high school, my very best friend, Shay, her brother, who was like a brother to me, he ended up going to federal prison for heroin possession. And he had been fighting addiction all since we were like in junior high and had been going through it. And I saw what his incarceration did to their family. And it was devastating, absolutely devastating. The whole family goes to prison. It was a nightmare. And all I could think, and then I saw him when he got out of prison and his soul was wounded. And I just couldn't believe that that was in any way the answer to anything. And so, it really gave me an interest in criminal law of what I could do to be a part of the solution that we could, do better and not just make things worse. And, I really thought I was going to do human rights, but then, I got the taste and I love fighting for the underdog. I love getting to fight for the principles of the Constitution. You get to be a little bit high and mighty sometimes because we fight for the principle. That's the deal. And so, it's kind of fun when somebody comes in with an impossible case with the worst circumstances, all the decks stacked against them, because that is when it is the most fun to hold the line for the Constitution, because that is when it is the easiest for everybody to say it doesn't matter. So, it turns out that this is what I was born to do.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Let me ask you, I know that you have a certification. You're board certified criminal defense attorney. What exactly does that certification mean for you, your clients?
Well, that's a good question. So in Texas, to do board certification, I think we have 3% of Texas lawyers are board certified in anything. So it is a very rare thing because you actually have to prove up that you've tried a certain amount of cases first chair to verdicts. And it's quite a list that most people don't do. And so you really have to be fighting for it. But not only that, then you get recommendations from people you've tried cases against, with, and judges that you've tried cases in front of. And then after you go through all of that, they have a multi-day test that you go and do, and that has like a 50-50 pass rate. And so most people take it a couple of times to get through it. And after all of that, I think that's how only, whatever it is, it's like 2 point something percent of attorneys. And, for me, it was a challenge because I knew that I was trying more cases that have more complexity than the average bearer. And I wanted to find a way to let people know what that meant. Like, because if you have a serious case and you're looking, I mean, every lawyer says that they can handle everything, right? I mean, every criminal lawyer is like, I got you, da da da. But like, how do you quantitatively know that somebody has done more than their peers? Like, that's kind of a hard thing because, like, in Texas, you can't put actual statistics on your webpage. I can't say I've gotten, 72% of cases I've tried to a jury have been not guilty. You cannot say that, even though it's the truth or whatever it is. And you can't even put up numbers necessarily. You can put up cases and actual results, but that's about it. So it's real hard if you're a consumer trying to figure out, like, who are the good attorneys? Who's winning? Who has won cases like mine? Like, there is no reasonable way to find that out. And so I don't know, for me, like, board certification was a way to automatically, like, separate yourself from the pack.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. And I can see why you have earned quite a reputation. Uh, many wins for clients. Other lawyers even come to you for trial advice. What's your secret sauce? Is it Texas charm? Is it chess-like strategy, or just that plain grit that you have?
Right, but like, I lead heart first. I am dealing with humans. I'm not dealing with widgets in a factory. I'm dealing with humanity and people in the darkest place of their life. It is, in some ways it's an honor to be a light in that circumstance because, people can feel it and you can make a really big impact in people's lives and, listening and hearing them and trying to get a solution that's not going to absolutely destroy their life. And so, I think just actually really trying to dig into the humans that I sit with, because it's so easy to dehumanize in the system. It's so easy. Everything has numbers, nothing has even pictures on it, just pushing it all through, and everybody wants to brag about this and that. But at the end of the day, these are real humans on both sides, on all the sides of these cases. And it's hard stuff. It's real human emotion. And I think, like, when I first started, people said that you have to, like, numb yourself to all of these things to get through it. And I think it's absolutely the opposite. I think you have to open up your heart to things and then you feel it differently and it hits different and you can see it differently. And I think if I ever can't do that, I should probably hang up my shingles.
I can definitely hear the passion in your voice, and I know you've earned the moniker Queen of Acquittals. Now, when you first heard that nickname, did you feel like you'd unlocked a secret level in the courtroom game, or do you think now, great, now they'll expect me to win every time?
It's funny that you say that. So it came about probably 10 years ago because Texas Monthly was doing a expose on our court appointed system, and they were interviewing people in custody about their experiences with their lawyers. And apparently my clients were singing my praises and were like, yeah, we call her the Queen of Acquittals. And so they published this and said it in this magazine. And so everyone's like, wait, what? Who did you pay to say? How did this just organically happen? And so that's kind of how it came about. And I will tell you, the funny thing is, so then it kind of like caught on, like, it just caught on. And so it was funny because whenever I would, like, if I ever put it on anything, the state bar is like, you can't say that, but I can because if it's in quotes, because it was in a published thing. So it is a little bit It is, I feel good. It was organic. It was not, I know everyone's like, did you put a plant? Did you make that happen? I didn't. I swear it really did.
I absolutely love it. And you're no stranger to high profile cases. I know you've made media appearances for commentary. If you had an ad lib moment on national TV, what's the one thing about criminal defense most people get wrong, and what would you want to correct?
I think that there is a massive misunderstanding on so many things. I would love to have a nonprofit that just put truth out as far as like facts for criminal law. If we followed evidence-based practices, we would have a fraction of the amount of people in prison. I think we're throwing away fathers and thought leaders and innovators by imprisoning a generation of men of color. I think it's disgusting. I think it's going to be a dark era in humanity when we have caged this many humans in the name of safety. And instead, what we've done is created orphans and foster kids and people in poverty because they don't have their other parent to help raise their kids. This is a tragedy of mass proportions in the modern generation. And I feel like at some point we have to reevaluate because empirically it is just not working. Locking up people in cages at a mass level has not worked. It has been a failed experiment. And I think that there is a better way to do it. And I think we can look around the world at many other ways that people have done things. And when you look at criminal justice, it's one of the few social sciences that hasn't evolved with evidence-based practices. I mean, you look at medicine, it's evolved. You look at any other kind of even a social science, and it has evolved. But criminal justice has just been stuck. We are doing things like we did in the 1800s procedurally. We have not changed things. That is crazy. But there is this fear of change in criminal law, and all they have to do is go raping babies or say something that's terrible that freaks everybody out. Everybody goes, do anything you need to do then. And that's how we trade our liberty for safety. That is how we do it repeatedly. And I think that we have to honestly throw the brakes on the whole situation because I think that it has gotten wildly out of hand, and I think that there's a better way to do it. I think that and all the research is already in. Like we don't even have to do the research. It's all in. We know how we could do things better. Having it 40% of people, however many millions or thousands and hundreds of thousands that is in prison for drugs is a great example. It's a failed experiment that needs to end. So that's what I would say if I could say things to people is, we need to cage a lot fewer human beings.
I agree with you. I know that trials can be unpredictable. Uh, they can be emotionally charged. And again, you've handled some of the toughest cases. Does the adrenaline ever hit you mid-trial and remind you you're literally fighting for freedom? And if so, how do you stay calm enough to still think three moves ahead?
You know, I was trying to think the other day. I had a hearing and they were asking how many murder trials we've tried. And I think it was like 15. I can't remember. But there's more. I've tried almost 100 jury trials. But, you know, there is a point when they come back, when the judge comes back and it says there's a verdict, your stomach falls to the ground. I don't care how many times you've done it. Like it is, there is no fear like standing next to a human being that is facing being locked in a cage and losing their liberty. There is nothing more fear to the core of a person's soul. And you can feel it, standing with a person, just the fear that is so deep that I can't even fathom of facing being in a cage and what that would look like to live your life. It is, I don't know. I don't think there's ever going to be a time that it's not scary. It's scary because there's only so much you can do to control the situation. And ultimately, you have 6 in a misdemeanor, 12 in a felony people that you've never met, analyzing law with no legal training and making a decision that'll affect somebody's life forever and their entire family's life. And you
Heavy, stressful.
is. And it's hard. I think a lot of defense attorneys, everybody, it eats at you. It's hard to have that balance. And I think we all struggle with it. So when there's so much substance abuse in my profession, people really struggle because it is an emotional toll. And I think that I have to actively seek out ways to balance my life. Like actively. I read poetry in the morning. I go for long walks. I play with my dogs. I do artsy stuff. I bake. I do things radically different than trying hardcore murders and federal cases.
I'm really glad you brought that up because that was my next question. How do you keep from carrying all that emotion home with you at the end of the day?
No, I don't necessarily. I do sometimes. I mean, my husband is actually the operations manager at the firm, and so it's funny we don't see each other that often because it is so busy, and I am usually in court or at other places, and he's at mission control with other, the rest of the folks that work here. But it is, it's nice because he understands and he has like a very deep knowledge of what I do, and so he understands like we are dealing with like again the worst thing that is happening in somebody's life, and there's in that situation people get sad and mad and all the emotions, and there's a lot of blame, there's all kinds of stuff, and I think you really have to work on processing it through, not shutting it off necessarily, but just figuring out how you can process this as a person and still be functional.
Yes, and I know when we were speaking prior, um, there's a phrase, don't mess with Texas. Okay, and that's always been a badge of toughness. But when it comes to capital punishment, I told you earlier, Florida, Alabama, that they're out Texasing Texas these days. And I did allude to new legislation put in by Governor DeSantis where they were able to put an individual on death row without a unanimous decision by the jury, which is, in my mind, crazy. And I'm very curious to get your take on it as a seasoned Texas defense attorney. Do you think that that kind of change would ever fly in Texas as well?
Oh, anything terrible they will do in Texas in criminal law. So don't give them any ideas for sure. I'm sure this is probably already cooking with somebody over here. However, it sounds like it's constitutionally problematic on its face. I mean, and Texas does have a history of enacting unconstitutional laws and then having to make everybody fight it out. So, it's there's a ballot right now initiative in Texas, as crazy as this is. I believe it's initiative 21, where they are moving to amend the Texas Constitution to allow certain crimes to not get a bail. So if somebody calls in a certain crime, you just lose everything and you're stuck in jail with no bail. Don't think that's going to pass constitutional muster, but it's going to take about a year of people suffering in jail to have to fight this on a constitutional level. So Texas could care less about constitutionality. They're just like, we're going to do it and then we'll see what happens. So there's some really frightening things on the ballot that I hope people can see through this nonsense.
Yeah, frightening craziness. I see it every day on the news. You were telling me prior to the interview that there was a cold case that you were working on. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I'm working with the Travis County DA's office, which is the DA's office here where I practice in Texas, in Austin. And it was a case from 1979, and my client, Michael Galvan, was arrested for this murder of Deborah Sue Reading at the time, Deborah Sue Wilt. And she was alleged to have been killed January 22nd of 1979 in Austin, and they never caught her killer. However, they arrested Michael Galvan in 2017 because sperm on a robe that she was wearing turned out to be his. So she was married, so they immediately were like, we caught the killer because she's wearing this robe. However, one of the first things that we ended up doing was using a new testing technique with a doctor out in California that does DNA testing. And she was able to use this impact technique and basically break down the sample that they had on the robe and figure out that it was actually the sperm they found on the robe had actually disintegrated to the amount that it appeared to have been 3 days old, which actually excluded him from the murder site as opposed to including him at the murder site. So that was kind of step one. And then we tested about 100 other things. And so since then the case was dismissed. It was clearly not him. but we still have some DNA that we're trying to identify. So now we're trying to get a grand jury subpoena to get some more DNAs from some folks up in Montana where the people originated. And if this matches up, then I think we've got the killer. And at this point, I'm friends with the family of the deceased. Everybody's sort of working together. But it's a journey, because what I've seen is that, when law enforcement get it wrong out of the gate, they are very reticent to come in and say we were wrong. Very, very hard for them to do, even when the science is in front of them. It is very, very hard for law enforcement to admit that they arrested the wrong person and charged the wrong person with murder.
Fascinating. Let me ask you, for younger attorneys starting out who want to build a name, not necessarily the Queens of Acquittals in criminal defense, what advice would you give them about developing trial skills and professional reputation, most importantly?
I really think like getting on the field and fighting for it, like being the best, being the most prepared, like doing all of the things. And I think honestly, it's funny, everything that I think when I first started back in, 2003, that I thought was going to hinder me, like being Hispanic, being a woman, being younger, all these things made me better because I was more prepared than everyone. I was there before everyone. I was more charming than everyone. I feel like it's truly an interesting situation because I think in some ways it is very law of the jungle, and it can be that you can forge your own path. There's not a lot of professions that you can truly just go out and forge your own path. And I think that is what I have learned in this deal, is that it is very much you create who you want to be in this deal. And but it's very interesting because it is a small world, everybody talks, and I think that professional reputation is everything, as far as like you don't misbehave anywhere because everybody talks to each other and everybody knows each other. And so ultimately your reputation goes with you. And so everything that you do matters. And so, it's people remember things. And so I remember things. I remember good things and bad things that people did along the way. I think we all do. And this job is kind of like that. So I think when you go a little bit extra and you try to just be a good person and keep your word, it can get you everywhere. Don't be afraid to do the right thing all the time. That's what I would say.
Understood. You said a couple of things that caught my ear. 42 years ago, female, Hispanic. Was there a glass ceiling?
Yeah, well, there's no path. There's no law firm owned by some Hispanic woman looking for others. There was no at the DA's office at the time, they wanted people with experience, which were mostly white dudes. And there just wasn't a path to do this. And so, I think and people, it's funny because the jury CLEs and stuff that I had went to as a baby lawyer were like, ooh, don't do all these things. And it was basically don't act like a young Hispanic girl. But it was like everybody, if there was only one mold, and that was the mold of like the old white man defense attorney, right? There wasn't another mold. And so I think like at some stage in the game, I realized that I was going to have to make a new mold.
Excellent. So, trailblazer as well. We'll add that one to the list.
Made a mold.
Excellent. Finally, for listeners who might need representation or just want to learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to reach you? Your website, your phone number?
Yes, all of these things. So website is it's Criminal Law Austin. And so it's CRIMINALLAWAUSTIN. So just all written out, Criminal Law Austin. Our number is 512-220-8507. You can even email me directly at amber@criminallawaustin.com. And all of those ways, our operations manager, our paralegal will get right back and get people in. And we're trying to see people if we're seeing folks in jail. I represent people in federal cases in different parts of the country. So, I do Texas for state, but we do Advocacy in Phoenix right now. We just got back yesterday. So I do a lot of federal stuff in other places. So, and I really enjoy that a lot.
Awesome. Amber, I have to tell you, I absolutely love your energy.
Okay.
You're very welcome. There's no doubt no doubts that I have why you are successful and why you wear that title, Queens of Acquittal. And I really want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun. I'm so glad that we got to do this.
Thank you for listening to the Top Attorneys podcast. The Top Attorneys celebrates the achievements of leading attorneys across the nation. To be featured, send a message or visit www.topattorneys.us.